the same forces that have blocked voting rights and suppressed the voting rights. We've not seen the Voting Rights Act restored in 10 years. So in 10 years, no Voting Rights Act, 13 years, no living wages. We can do better than that. We must do better than that as a nation and as a country. We cannot continue to accept the reality. And in the South, lastly, in the South, there's not a state in the South that's under 40% poor and low-wealth people. Not one state in the South. That does not have to be, and it can be changed through policy, and it must be changed through policy.
Congressman, one of the reasons I always love talking with the Reverend is because he does what he just did there, where he connected the dots and said, you know, yeah, we need to talk about SNAP, we need to talk about his benefits. It's also actually connected to the Voting Rights Act. It's actually connected to whether or not people have the ability to express their frustrations to their representatives without barriers, without additional hurdles. Americans right now are caught up in an affordability crisis. We're talking about food. That's one piece of it. You talk about childcare. You talk about housing. I mean, how is that mom of 6 making ends meet?
She's not. And what's so frustrating about this, a few things. One, to quote Tupac Shakur, we got money for wars but can't feed the poor. We can give tax breaks to the wealthiest among us, but we can't extend the child tax credit, which is something we were pushing to do last Congress and something that was stopped by Democrats in the Senate. If we are the wealthiest nation on earth. We have levels of inequality that rival the Gilded Age. If we were to pass the Build Back Better Act, which we were looking to pass last term that was stopped by Democrats, we would have pretty much universal child care. We would have extended the child tax credit. One of the first bills that we fought for when I got to Congress was a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour. There are places in this country where the minimum wage is $7 an hour. How can you live on that? Housing should be a human right. It should be a human right. We should have a home for everyone. Instead, we have housing caught up in the marketplace. And that's why we don't have enough stock, and people can't find a home. And then many people, they're paying upwards of 50% of their salary towards housing costs, utility costs. We introduced a bill, the Emergency Price Stabilization Act, to deal with the issue of price gouging from corporations, because that's what this is. This is price gouging from corporations. We also introduced the Heating and Cooling Relief Act so we could bring utility costs down to 3% of a person's salary. So this is a crisis. And Republicans, they don't want to deal with any of this. They want to cut so-called SNAP. They want to cut Social Security. They want to cut things like that while giving tax breaks to the wealthy. And this is why we need Democrats to take back control in 2024. And we need to grow our numbers in the Senate, because that's the only way we're going to be able to meet the needs of the American people.
Here's the thing, Reverend. It's easy to talk about this in the way that it most presents itself, which is, can you literally put food on the table? Can you literally put a roof over your family? There is a psychological cost to wondering whether or not you will be able to do that for the people you most love. And there are people all across this country who are living with the psychological strain of not knowing whether or not their family is going to be housed, not knowing whether or not they're going to have enough food so that their kids can have 2-3 meals a day. Now, as we're having this conversation, you have House and Senate Republicans at odds on the issues of Medicare, of Social Security. Axios now reporting a group closely aligned with House Republican leadership spending $2 million to flip the script on Medicare, doing so by accusing the president of being the one who wants to cut Medicare. I mean, it's like living in the upside down.
Yeah, you know, when these issues are Democrat and Republican, it's so bad because really these are moral issues, and it's really about life and death. And my Congress brother said the right thing. You know, we have to own this. 50 Republicans and 2 Democrats block what we're talking about from happening. And you think about that. 52 per people blocked 55 million Americans from getting a living wage. 52 people said no to continuing the child tax credit, which brought 60%, 50% of children out of poverty for a few months and then throws them right back into poverty. But it's not, it's the psychological hit. But this is the other thing we're going to have to start talking about is death. Columbia University said that 700 people die a day from poverty. 700 people died. That's 250,000 people a year. We're going to have to start talking in terms that these policies are not benign. When you block health care, people die. When you block voting rights, which then allows people to get in office who will block health care, people die. When you block living wages, people die. When you continue to allow poverty that doesn't have to exist, people die. When you claim we have scarcity, we do not have scarcity of resources or scarcity of ideas. What we have is a scarcity of moral consciousness and commitment to do the things that are right. And that is the problem. And that's what breaks people's spirit. And, you know, I fear for this country if the 140 million or 120 million people who are in poverty and low wealth, if just 20% ever just lose hope and just give up, you know, what we saw on January 6th could be like a birthday party. I don't want to see that. We can do better than this. We have to do better than this. That everything we're talking about is fixable, but it is one sad state of affairs when people get elected. And think about it, every politician, when they get elected, they get free health care paid for by the people. How then do you turn around and block other people from having health care? That is crazy when you think about it from a moral perspective.
Congressman, you have the last word.
Yeah. So to the psychological point, poverty creates toxic stress and chronic trauma. Toxic stress and chronic trauma leads to mental health challenges and substance abuse challenges. You know what else it leads to? Crime. And it's connected to the public safety issue. If you want to improve public safety in our country, take a public health approach first and foremost by investing in programs that end poverty in our country.